Hello everyone. So in this video we are going to see the questions raised by classical tradition. I know you're all eagerly waiting to know what are the questions raised by classical tradition. So if you have any idea that these might be the questions raised by classical tradition, so you can post it in the comment box, then we will reply to that question. So the questions will not be like who is your favorite actor, who is your favorite heroine and all. Okay, so the questions are raised by the classical tradition, not the human beings. So you want to be familiar with this. So we will see the questions raised by classical tradition. What is the nature of literary representation? So literature is representing something. So what is the nature of it? And then what is the function of literary studies? So if we are reading a particular subject, we want to know its function and we want to know its role in one's life. Then only we can um, learn that subject properly. Okay, so these are all the questions. So we will see the solutions which were given for these questions. Gone through several transformations. So these two questions have gone through several transformations in the past ages. So after undergoing several transformations, they have formed the basis for what is now being called as Renaissance criticism. So after undergoing several transformations, they have formed the basis for Renaissance criticism. So if a thing is undergoing a transformation, definitely it is in the process of molding. So once it is molded, it will stand as a model for something. So to make you understand more clearly, uh, during in the process of learning, a student is being molded by the teachers. Once the student is properly molded, definitely he or she will serve as a model for others. So here too, these two questions, after undergoing several transformations, they have formed the basis for Renaissance criticism. Okay, they have given the works written by two writers. That is, the one is Thomas Wilson's The Art of Rhetoric, the other is Roger Ascham's The Schoolmaster. So what these two works are trying to convey, we will see further. Wilson's books, that is Wilson's The Art of Rhetoric, serves as a guide for what? To master the art of using language as an instrument of persuasion. So, in order to communicate, in order to convey something, we will use language. So, in order to use language as an instrument of persuasion, we want to master that art. So, this book, The Art of Rhetoric, serves as a guide to master that art. And then what this book is conveying, trying to convey, this one, The Schoolmaster. So Ascham's book emphasizes the importance of language in education. So education plays a pivotal role. That is, in education, language plays a pivotal role. Sorry for a misunderstanding. So consider a situation. We can take a boy whose mother tongue is Tamil. So if he is attending a school, but all the contents of his subject is given in French or German, so will he be able to understand the concept? Definitely no. He will not be able to understand even the title of the subject. So without understanding even the title of the subject, how can he read that particular subject and how can he learn something? So in education too, language plays an important role. So this is what he emphasizes in his work. So these two things are trying to convey only the same thing in a different way, that is language. So both emphasizes on rhetoric. Okay, I know you're aware of what is rhetoric. Criticism. In ancient days, they have given a definition for what is criticism. That is, criticism meant to teach poets and orators the study of diction, the arrangement of words, figures of speech, etc. As we have already seen in our previous video, the job of critics is to measure the worth of a text. So, if a writer is writing a particular work, but he is not following the arrangement of words, so if he doesn't follow the arrangement of words, we can't get the proper meaning what the writer is trying to convey. So definitely there will arise a misunderstanding. So in order to avoid all these confusions, the critic is there. So he will teach the poets or orators, so what are the things he needs to follow while writing a work, so what are all the mistakes he had done in her previous work, and what he should do in order to avoid those kind of mistakes in his or her upcoming works. So he is like a tutor. So critic is like a tutor for the writer. So this is the definition. This was the definition given for the criticism in ancient days. So Philip Sidney's An Apology for Poetry. We all remember this writer. So he is famous for his work An Apology for Poetry. It was written in 1580. So it was basically rhetoric oriented. So Sidney, he is considered as the first poet critic in the history of English critical tradition. So he is not only poet but also critic. So he is both poet and critic. So he is considered as the first poet critic in the history of English critical tradition. Ben Jonson paved the way for the neoclassicism of Dryden and his followers. We all know that Ben Jonson is famous for neoclassicism. So he paved the way for Dryden and his followers for neoclassicism. And then he is first of the anti-romantics to pave the way for the neoclassicism. And then took Latin comedy as his model. For his writings, he took Latin comedy as his model. And then Age of Dryden saw the birth of neoclassicism in England. So during the Age of Dryden, we could find the birth of neoclassicism. Only during the Age of Dryden, neoclassicism arose in England. So we could say that Dryden lived in an age of uncertainty. So uncertainty means nothing is definite, nothing is determinate. So everything is with uncertainty. So Dryden lived in an age of uncertainty. So how Dryden's criticism works will be, so everything will be in a descriptive format. So descriptive, historical and comparative. Historical means so his works will contain historical facts, that is truth and factual information. And then comparative, we can compare Dryden's criticism with any other writer's works. So it will be like descriptive, historical and comparative. So it will be full of theoretical papers, and then it will contain only the factual information, and then we can compare his works with any other writers. Treated the whole of the European tradition as one. So he treated the whole European tradition as one. So he has not differentiated, or he has not any distinguish between any of the European tradition. And then we refer the period between 1660 to 1745 as the Augustan age. The people who lived during that age were Pope. We all know that Alexander Pope, Swift, Jonathan Swift, Addison and Steele. Okay, these people lived during that period. And then Dr. Johnson, he is the author of the lives of the poets. He is the author of the lives. And then he is the first bioliterary critic. So bio is something related to living. So he is the first bioliterary critic. Too much of a classist, too magisterial in manner. Too much of a classist means something related to ancient. So Dr. Johnson is much of a classist rather than modernist. See, he is much of a classist. And then too magisterial. Magisterial in the sense so authoritative. So in manner. And then Dryden, Pope, Addison, Swift, Johnson, Goldsmith and Edmund Burke, they were all the writers who represent neoclassicism. Okay. Spontaneous overflow of powerful feeling. So, on hearing this definition, we could remember only Wordsworth. So, this is what the definition given by Wordsworth for what is literature. So, Matthew Arnold regarded literature as a criticism of life. So, what this Matthew Arnold is considering? He considers literature as a criticism of life. So, what are all the happenings and what are all the events happening in one's life is criticized through literature. This is what he is trying to convey. And then Arnold's, on hearing the name Arnold, we could remember Touchstone method. Okay, Arnold's key literary notion is the concept of touchstone. So we all know what is touchstone method. So if you are not aware of what is touchstone method, you can post the comment, then I will make videos on touchstone method. So his main concept is touchstone method. It is like a concept which he follows in order to criticize other writers' works. And then Sydney's romantics like Wordsworth, Coleridge and others. So we have already seen four types of approaches. So some of the writers write the work based on theory oriented approaches. So we will see who are all the writers. So Sydney's romantics, that is Wordsworth, Coleridge and others, they all write their writings based on theory oriented approaches. So we could apply some theories. And then some writers like Samuel Johnson, Matthew Arnold, T.S. Eliot and F.R. Lewis, they have made their writings based on text oriented approach. So we will consider we will analyze that work only using the text. So they have written like that. So whatever the thing they have written, either they have written based on theory oriented approaches or they have written based on text oriented approaches, both merges together. So merges with the theory oriented approaches. So this text oriented approaches merges with the theory oriented approaches of the 1980s and 1990s. So at last the text oriented approaches join hands together with theory oriented approaches of 1980s and 1990s. So with this, the chapter Changing Worlds and Changing Words have come to an end. So if you have any doubt in all the videos which we have posted regarding this topic, changing worlds and changing words, you can make a comment in the comment box. Then we will rectify it. We will try to give a solution for your doubts and clarifications. If you need any further clarification or if you need any detailed information regarding a particular topic, then you can post that also in comment box. So thank you for watching.